Welcome to Balanced Life with Debbie Carlin Boyle. Conversations connecting to a healthier you. The show that gives you all the latest and greatest health and wellness information to inspire you to live a life of balance and joy. Debbie Carlin Boyle is a health and nutrition coach, personal trainer, and fitness instructor who helps her clients live in balance with everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. Please welcome your host, Debbie Carlin Boyle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Tuesday. It's the 4th Tuesday of July. Welcome to my show. Thank you for joining me today. I am Debbie Carlin Boyle, your host. This is Balanced Life. I'm conversations that connect to a healthier you. Again, we got a conversation that I hope connects you today. And I would love for you to get involved with our conversation today. And in order to do that, you could do it one of two ways. Right now, if you're watching me live, streaming on my Facebook page, you can make a comment, ask a question, and we'll get back to you after the show. Or you can call in, write this number down if possible. It's area code 323-524-2599. Call in anytime, ask my guest a question. We're talking about climate change today and what's going on in our world and what you can do to help contribute to making it a better place. So if that interests you, get involved in this conversation. I like to keep the conversations going even after the show. So if you're watching after the fact, go ahead and make a comment on my Facebook page or on my YouTube channel. I'd love to hear from you. And I am your host, Debbie Carlin Boyle. So I am a personal trainer, a fitness instructor, and a health coach, a nutrition coach. I help people find balance with everything that connects us to live a long and healthy life. And sometimes you just need somebody to be your accountability person, and I'm it, well-trained, and individualize it to work with you. So to find me, you can go to my website. It's balancelifebydebbie.com, and there is a little section there that says connect with me, and just go ahead and fill that out. Hit send, and I get right back to you, and we can start you on a journey. I do give free introductory sessions, so we can find out what's going on with you, and then you can make a decision. I also do group training, and there's all kinds of groups stuff on there, both for physical fitness and for group coaching. So take a look if any of that resonates with you. I'd love to hear from you and work with you. So today we're going to get on with the show. So happy that you're joining us today. So climate change is the result of the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, primarily burning of fossil fuels for energy and other human activities. These gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane, warm and alter the global climate, which causes environmental changes to occur that can harm people's health and well-being. Though there have been previous periods of climatic change, since the mid-20th century, humans have had an unprecedented impact on Earth's climate system, and the cause is damages on a global scale. So my guest today is Troy Carter. He is the CEO of Earthshot Labs, which is building the technology for planetary-scale ecological restoration. He's also the co-founder at RIZOME, which is pioneering the use of bamboo-engineered lumber as a climate-positive alternative to wood, steel, and concrete. He is bringing the audacious scale and vision of startup methodology to the planet's ecological and climate crisis. He has focused on financing renewable energy and agriculture projects for the last 6 years. Today, we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about all we can do to make a difference for the planet, the climate, and our future. So, could you please welcome to the show my guest, Troy Carter. There we are. Hi, Troy.
Thanks for having me, Debbie. Appreciate the time.
I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. I know you're doing wonderful things for our world, and you're traveling. I was able to track you down and lock you in. So thank you for taking the time out today to join us. We have a few things to talk about that you've been working on and that you're all about. one of the things that I like to do with my guest is start with their background and a little bit, like where you grew up and where your passion for what you're doing now, how it drove you to this place, and some of the things that you did to get here.
I'm 32, and I think that I don't have any, I maybe I do have an interesting background, but it's not because of my background or intelligence or capacity in any particular way that I am working to address climate change or ecological restoration. Go ask any 14-year-old pretty much anywhere in the world some of the things that they care about, and a lot of them will say, hey, climate change is a big problem, and we are creating systems, economic systems, and incentive structures that are doing a lot of harm to the planet. We need to stop that. So I'm not unique in this. My background, has been in a lot of different areas. Prior to founding Earthshot Labs, which is developing technology for ecological restoration, I was a co-founder at RIZOME. So we are pioneering the use of climate positive bamboo engineered lumber to decarbonize the built environment and stop deforestation, and then do large scale reforestation throughout Southeast Asia. Before that, I was really involved in project finance, doing consulting for renewable energy and agriculture projects. But to be honest, it was mostly living in Hawaii with my wife and hosting retreats on our land there, which is part of, the title of this podcast is Balanced Life. And I think one of the things that Earthshot brings and that I bring is the importance of bridging, this technical rigor and technological solutions and, world-class academics and institutions and NGOs and all of that world with a real deep, intimate connection with place, with nature, with ceremonial experience, with community, like things that are just immediately nourishing, so that the journey of working on big problems can be consistently nourishing for everyone involved, so that we don't face out, so that all of our employees actually do have a lot of fun facing issues that are involved with a crisis. So that's been, I would say, the story of my background is bringing balance, bringing connection with nature, and being involved with some very large successful projects. I was an early employee at Airbnb. I started and sold my own company a couple of years later. I studied economics at Stanford. I grew up in the Caribbean. So just like
there it
really,
is.
really
you
brief
grew up
summary.
in the Caribbean. Why? What did your parents do that you were there?
My parents were chemical engineers. They actually worked at an oil refinery on St. Croix. But I think it is true that growing up in a place that is intimately surrounded by non-human nature is totally essential for humans. Like it's completely essential to bring a level of pacing to the biological system, to our whatever neuroscience system, so that we actually like have healthy lives. I lived on Hawaii for the last 7 years, and I think that's also part of it, is living in a place where there's no light pollution, where there's no sound pollution. Right now I'm in Mill Valley for a few days, and there's a guy with a electrical tool outside hammering away.
Oh, is that what we're hearing?
Exists where we live. It is. So the importance of natural environments, and I would say what we're doing at Earthshot, we're restoring nature for its own sake. Addressing climate change is one thing, but it's more that we are using this crisis, which is a major global crisis with massive impacts for humans, as an opportunity to restore nature for its own sake, because of just an inherent love for nature.
Yes. And that's it. I mean, yes. And without it, what we're seeing right now is so almost catastrophic in a way. We were just talking before the show what's going on around the world. And, we're here in the middle of summer, and there are massive floods going on in this country, throughout Europe. and we have fires here, and what we're seeing is really kind of catastrophic. And we talked about the amount of fear and stress that sort of comes up. And what you're doing is you're working sort of from the back end and saying, okay, we knew this was coming. We know this is coming. Nature has the answers for us. We just have to dig deep, and we have to all get involved to do it. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on and what Earthshot is. Like, what is it that how did it get going in the first place?
Yeah. So Earthshot was born last year because really with my friend Patrick, who was, worked at Google for a decade and, was CTO at a hedge fund for a few years, who also had an ecological awakening, realizing we need to use the technology and level of sophistication that, companies like Google and Two Sigma use to actually help restore nature. And so we spent some time identifying high leverage points to be able to use technology to help scale up nature. The first thing we did was start an open source community, because if you can measure nature, help measure ecosystems, then we can better understand how to actually regenerate them and how to pay people to regenerate them. Mm-hmm. So we've built a couple really interesting tools. One, we have an open source community of more than 1,000 members with academic institutions and companies from all around the world contributing to a global map of soil, forests, and water. And if we can better understand these ecosystems, we can use existing market levers like carbon markets to actually pay people to do reforestation, to implement regenerative agriculture practices, to do conservation or conservation forestry. And right now, we are doing basic research. So the state of science is it's pretty limited. We understand how ecosystems work a little bit, but now we have access to such sophisticated satellite imagery that we can see every tree on Earth. And that we also have LiDAR, and we have smartphones, so we can take pictures of trees, so we can get site observations for really accurate measurements. So we're building a few products. One is this basic research. So it's an open source consortium for people of all different backgrounds, and scientists and data engineers and things like that, to contribute to measuring nature. The second stage is giving every landowner on Earth access to understanding the regenerative use of their land. So whether you have 1 acre or 1 million acres, you can go to LandOS, so it'll be out in about a month. And LandOS is an operating system for regenerative land management. So you can go click on your parcel, and it will be able to tell you the regenerative strategies that you can implement for water restoration, for reforestation, for regenerative agriculture, and then also give you pathways to pay for those interventions and profit from the interventions. So whether that's through carbon markets or other ways of actually paying for the intervention.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool.
We're doing one more thing.
Yeah.
We're also developing an app called Biome, which is essentially you take your smartphone and you scan the forest around you. And this might not seem like a lot, okay, so let's taking pictures of trees. But the reality is that information is critical for us to understand ecosystems for these large, global, complex machine learning models, so that everyone on Earth can have a way to engage meaningfully with the climate crisis by putting data from their ecosystem into our method.
Wow.
Into our models.
That's a big, tall order, literally, to get all of this data gathered and be able to get it back to these landowners and get it back in general. And that's a lot of work and research and a lot of people to get involved. I'm very impressed, because it's not easy. You can have a vision. It isn't easy to actually implement it. Does this require, it requires some education, obviously, on the landowner's part. So, and you supply, like you were saying, the information that they need to create a sustainable environment for what they're doing with their land, as opposed to what, let's say, they're doing now or don't understand or don't know. Do you find that there's opposition, or do you feel there will be opposition, being that sometimes the bottom line, it could be more expensive to create this sustainable ecological environment?
Yeah. So maybe we can just take a step back. Something you said in the intro was that sort of like nature is the solution to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the rhetoric around climate change involves transportation or electric cars or solar power. And the truth is that those technological interventions represent only a very tiny fraction of how we actually need to go address climate. At least 2/3 of the CO2 will be drawn down through natural climate solutions. And fundamentally, the problem isn't that we're emitting too much carbon dioxide, it's that there's widespread ecosystem collapse, causing these basically feedback cycles that release more and more CO2 in the atmosphere as, you know, glaciers get uncovered and forests release more methane or more CO2. So nature has to be the primary way that we are looking at the climate crisis as an issue. And the great thing about nature is it's also like a very holistic way of addressing this crisis.
Big time.
Because what happens when you have a gorgeous forest? Well, it's actually really nice to walk around in an old growth redwood forest. Like it's some of the best experiences I've had. And so, and it's hard to quantify how much is an old growth redwood forest worth in terms of recreational value or beauty value or biodiversity. Like we don't have markets for those categories of how much biodiversity is worth. So that's sort of why we're saying nature for its own sake, but we're using the crisis a little bit to promote conservation. And it's true, landowners in general will do what they have to make a living. And that is right? Like people should have the right for regenerative livelihoods. And for indigenous peoples or rural people around the world that don't have many options of how to make a living, well, maybe cutting down the trees is their best option. So it's our responsibility to design systems where their best option is regenerative agriculture or conservation, where it is not extractive land use practices, intensive cattle grazing, or deforestation, or soybean farming, or other monoculture farming. So it's really it's not up to the landowner to do something good with their land because of moral obligation. It's really us to design systems that reward them more for doing the right thing. Because people don't want to just cut down forests. Like people are generally good. They cut down forests because they have to, right? Because they feel economic pressure.
That was my point. That was what I was saying. How do you penetrate, letting them see there's a better way that is, nature's way, basically. And how do you get through to them and still make it economically, favorable for them to do it. But, you do have, what we're going to do? We're going to take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about RIZOME and what you're doing, because that is a big part of what we're talking about right now, because this is a way to do it. And we'll get into that. We're going to take our first break, and we'll be right back after this message. I have been a wine enthusiast for many decades. But for a while, I had to stop drinking wine because of the sleepless nights and the headaches that I would have in the morning, even after only one glass. Does this sound familiar? So for the past 5 years, and since the start of my show, I've been looking for a healthy wine, and finally I found the answer I've been looking for: dry farm wines. Dry farm wines are lab tested for purity, just 12.5% alcohol or less, 0.15 grams of sugar or less per glass, very low sulfites, and free of toxic additives. Dry farm wines are dry farmed with healthy, biodiverse soil, and the taste, bright and vibrant due to no manipulation. I can't say enough about the amazing wines that I've tried, and now you too can drink wine and not worry about how it is negatively affecting your health. just go to dryfarmwines.com/balanced life by Debbie so you too can taste the love put into every bottle. Okay, we're back. We're back with my guest today, Troy Carter. And Troy Carter is the CEO of Earthshot Labs. And we're talking about climate change and really ways that you can get involved to help curtail it. And we're talking about what is going on right now. You also have a company that you're part of called RIZOME. Can you tell us what RIZOME is about and what you do there?
Yeah. So broadly, if Earthshot Labs is working at this on a large systemic level, trying to scope out the entirety of nature-based solutions and provide incentive structures, so really working in the background, RIZOME is an example of a specific solution that we've implemented. And one of these specific solutions is replacing wood stealing concrete with bamboo. In order to do that, we had to develop a bunch of technology and do sourcing of the largest bamboo in the world. So RIZOME is based in the Philippines. We manufacture bamboo plywood, which is used in construction and all other places that you can use plywood as a direct replacement for other pieces of plywood. So it stops deforestation. It's much more efficient land use. It's stronger. It's more fire resistant. So it's a technically superior product that is the same price or cheaper and is much more sustainable. So it's an example of a specific nature-based solution that provides regenerative livelihoods for local people, reinforces indigenous land agency in the region. So it's sort of like good on every level. And we also draw down a lot of carbon, for example, in doing large-scale reforestation, in planting bamboo in native forest. So good for ecology, good for people, is a sustainable and solid business. And I'm proud of the work that we've done there.
So that sounds amazing. Is it more expensive to implement this? Why is there resistance, or has there been resistance, or there's just not enough education about building with bamboo?
The reality is it's just new.
It's
new things take a long time to be introduced in the construction industry.
That's true.
So it's not that there's resistance. Actually, there's pretty much no resistance. It takes a long time to start an entirely new supply chain with new manufacturing technology, with a new product. And it's a lot of hard work for a long time. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this area building low CO2 cement or like steel with renewable energy, or other categories that are slowly making iterative changes.
Mm-hmm.
But decarbonizing the built environment is hard. And the solutions to climate change exist, but they need a long time with dedicated teams and a lot of sophistication to actually go make a really large scale impact.
Wow. Well, thank God for the teams that you have and that you've created, and the knowledge that you have to be able to get this out there and let people know that it's doable and it will work. What's it like? So working with bamboo, what's that? So you obviously have to plant it. And are you hoping to go, where did you say you're at? You're in the Philippines, right?
So based in the Philippines,
Mm-hmm.
mostly on the island of Mindanao. The process, so one, there are very large wild forests of bamboo on the island of Mindanao, of really large species of bamboo. For other places in the world, we will have to go plant bamboo. So, it requires maybe 250 hectares of bamboo per factory that we use. It's a very high biomass generation rate. So actually, it only takes about 8% of the land that using trees would. So it's much more efficient on land use. So you can imagine we're saving the world from deforestation by using land more efficiently. So for every 9 acres of native forest that we can preserve, and then plant 1 acre of bamboo for actual human use.
Wow, that's amazing.
The process: you take a very large pole of bamboo, you split it, you treat it. We laminate them together into panels, just like any other pieces of plywood. And right now, selling in the U.S. and North America, but in the future, I can imagine that there will be regional bamboo economies in India and Bangladesh, in the Philippines and Indonesia, throughout, Central America, Africa, where actually products from local people will be sold to local people, and it's much better than shipping trees or shipping cement across the world.
So would it require shifting those that are now working with, let's say, wood, redwood, or whatever, to rethink about what they're to the way they'll manufacture and work with bamboo, or are you trying to go to new manufacturers to start from scratch, or how would it?
So one, we are manufacturing the plywood ourselves. And in
And
terms of
selling?
construction companies, we don't want anyone to have to make an ecological decision. We only want them to make a decision that is based on what's the best and cheapest product. Otherwise, it really won't hit scale. One of the reasons solar has taken off is because it's cheaper than coal. If it wasn't cheaper than coal, probably very few people would do it. And so any existing solution has to be cheaper, and it has to be, a better quality material, and it has to be more renewable. So a builder doesn't have to do anything different. They don't have to know they're using bamboo plywood. In 10 years, everyone will know this was coming. It will just have been obvious that, oh yeah, you just use bamboo plywood. Of course, that's how we've always done it, right? Right now, we're just making that reality a little more obvious.
Okay, so that's good. So yeah, that's what I was wondering, whether or not you would have resistance to bamboo because it may not be that, but you're saying that people are going to know
Very
soon
little,
enough.
honestly.
Yeah, good.
There's For climate, I mean, maybe 5 years ago, there would have been like, oh, climate change isn't real, or like, why should we care about sustainability? We never hear that argument anymore.
That's good.
Um, and and the reality is everyone cares, right? Actually, everyone cares about the planet, right? There aren't people that are like, no, like Earth is sort of shitty, or I don't really care about nature. Like, people care,
I
and we underestimate how much other people care. And so creating better products that are actually good for the environment, it has a lot of cultural will behind it right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think there is this collective sort of energy, and just I can only speak for sort of my surroundings and a little bit in my travels, but there's it's kind of like, well, I care, but let other people do the work, and I'm on board with them doing what they're doing. But really, does come down to sort of everyday lifestyle things that we do, each of us can do, that can make a huge difference also, and contribute to the fact that we care and that we still want to enjoy these beautiful wonderments of nature before they're destroyed. So in order to do that, how can we, as a civilization, how do we address the climate crisis? And from small things, I mean, you're sort of doing the bigger things that we're saying thank you for, that we're like, okay, maybe I can financially contribute, but this is out of my realm. I guess what I'm saying is, when I'm out and about, the amount of trash I see that isn't biodegradable, the amount of things that, I mean, I drink out of it's been in the shot all along. I've had the same glass bottle for until it breaks. It stays with me. I just re-clean it. I mean, that's one way. My one small part. This is one of the things I do. I do many things, but this is one. But if everybody did that, there would be all these plastic bottles. What should we be doing? Where are the things? How do we break that down for the average person who wants it but doesn't know what to do to get there?
Mm-hmm. So the first one, I wish I had easy answers on this. A friend of mine, Charles Eisenstein, he has this great framework. Maybe it isn't his, but he uses a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I attribute it to him. The 4 levels of change, of how change works. So one is, we all know, you give a man a fish and he eats for a day. So these are sort of like the everyday little things that we can do that have a small impact, but they're direct. Like, like using a glass water bottle. The second one is you teach a man how to fish. And these are, the level of empowerment. So maybe this is through education or essentially changing people's minds about how things work or giving them other options. The third level is like these systemic projects for like Earthshot Labs or RIZOME, which is fundamentally changing the landscape of how incentive structures work or how economics works, or um, it's a level of sort of like, well, why does the fisherman not have so much fish in the ocean? Why does he have to drive 50 miles to get the same amount of fish that he used to just from his back porch? And so like these systemic issues that we can address, and that's where we can change our careers to work in climate. That's where we can start a business or join a business that is working on something we deeply believe in. So how do we use our time, which I believe is one of the most powerful ways. So like, yes, we can do all the things that we already know how to do in terms of conservation, but the biggest one is how we use our time, where we spend our intelligence and our talent and our career in. Are we working with a company that we are aligned with? How are we making our livelihood? And the fourth level is sort of like the narrative level of what is the sense of self or the story of what it means to be a human being that has caused an ecological crisis anyway. And this to me is a really interesting level that is much more about our relationships. It's much more about what we believe, our worldview, our religious or spiritual beliefs. So these are not separate layers, right? Our beliefs about how we interact with the planet, our sense of self, it includes just this body, or it includes my family, or it includes my community, or includes the entire earth. The sense of self matters dramatically in terms of what systems we design, what charity or empowerment interventions we actually go make in the world. And so this is something that could be a spiritual practice, it could be a community practice, but is working on the narrative layer. So I don't have an easy solution, right? These are very complex, but what you believe and how open and loving and caring and expanded you can be with your friends, with your family, what you spend your time on in terms of your career, and then individual actions throughout your daily life, of which we could, we all know what the solutions are in terms of individual actions.
Yeah, it's funny because so I have a 32-year-old daughter and a 35-year-old daughter. So when they were born, and I've always been in health and wellness, and I've always been in conservation in terms of being aware, just being aware. And my kids have always grown up eating organic and food from scratch, no processed food, all of that. Totally opposite from where I grew up in the 60s and how nobody cared about really what we put in our bodies or what the environment was around us at that point. So I realized when they were young, I wasn't paying that close of attention, right? But as they were getting older and things climate-wise were getting worse, and there was more than I realized that I could individually do, and also educate them based on my ignorance when I was, younger. As I started to get a little wiser, I started to educate them, whether it was just, doing recyclables or whatever, just one bag for recyclables, another bag for trash, as little amount of trash as you can, come up with. So at this age, that would be second nature to them, and they in turn would grow. And with their knowledge, to go to the next levels like you were talking about. And I had a granddaughter for 8 months ago, and now I'm looking at what's going on being much worse than when you were young, right? And I'm thinking about her. I'm really thinking about her and her generation and all those kids coming up. And what can I start doing right now that's even bigger than what I've done with my kids, that's going to educate her and help her to really enjoy this planet without it being gone, and you don't start those things like you're saying, that sense of self, it hits you when it's smack in the face in front of you. It took me having children, really, to say I care about something other than me. Then in that moment, and that fun I'm about to have, or health and wellness was always about how can I look my best? How can I feel my best? How can it was me. And then all of a sudden I got a bigger sense of it. Because unlike you, I didn't grow up in I grew up right here in the San Fernando Valley. And it was, the smog was so bad in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, that we had smog alerts. And we had to run indoors and stop all activity. And literally you would take a deep breath and your lungs would hurt so bad from the smog that's when emission controls, smog checks started with cars, and that changed. But even here, because we're a valley, so in the city it's much clearer because obviously you have the ocean, and then all of the pollution comes down into the valley, and we have a cloud of it, as you can see when you fly out of LA. And it drives me nuts that we're breathing this. And what can we do globally that's going to make that difference so we have control over what we're breathing, this air we're breathing. Anyway, I went off on a rant, but
well, I love this because something you just started with was that what catalyzed you was having children, where your sense of self, like where you got over yourself, like the desire to optimize health and wellness actually became about being of service to your kids. Like, well, yeah, it's important for me to be healthy, and it's important for me to be happy because I want to interact with the planet and my children and my family in a really wonderful way. But where it's not just about the self, there's so much motivation that comes when we open ourselves to caring deeply about others. So for some, maybe that's nature. For some, maybe that's their family or their grandkids. And yeah, environmental systems are having a hard time right now, right? There is unprecedented ecosystem collapse in the number of species going extinct, in water cycles in particular, forming very extreme weather events. And our kids are going to have a harder time of it than we are. And we're only just now starting to see the beginnings of tremors in climate disturbances. Humanity's had an unprecedented, relatively stable period the last 8,000 years or so. And that's not the way it's been throughout most of Earth's history. So it's not to scare people. It's really to acknowledge that Earth's ecosystems are highly variable. And right now we are causing a major unprecedented level of variability that's going to have real implications that could mean, in some predictions, hundreds of millions of climate refugees over the next 20 years in places like Bangladesh or other low-lying areas. Like, that's a level of crisis that we've never seen before. Humanity's never encountered that level of crisis. And so,
but we're kind of heading towards that if we don't address these things.
And even if we implement all the strategies recommended by the IPCC, and we may have already hit some thresholds where it'll be very difficult to return to what it was 50 years ago. So I'm actually quite optimistic. I think we have the cultural will. There's plenty of money to implement solutions. There's plenty of very well-known strategies. You can go to Project Drawdown, which is a great website, which lists the top 100 solutions to climate change. That if we do all these, problem fixed. Most of them are nature-based, and a lot of them, involve electricity or, other technological interventions. So we know what the solutions are. There's plenty of money. There's more than like $2 billion in latent private equity funds just sitting there waiting for something to invest in that has a positive return. So the money is there.
Well, that's interesting.
If we have the cultural will to just go spend it on the things that really matter, where we value nature in a way that actually realizes its full impact and benefit for humans, which is really large.
Wow. I didn't realize that there is money there to do that. That's good. We're going to take my last break, and come back and talk about how people can contact you, get involved with what you're doing, what you need from us, what you want the audience to know about what you're doing, and how we can get involved with what you've got going on. And we'll be right back after this last message. Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Do you feel like you're stuck in a dinner rut? Well, with HelloFresh, you get pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. You can skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and keyword here, affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. With over 25 recipes to choose from each week, there's something for everyone to enjoy. All the recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity. I've always told my clients that when it comes to diet, it isn't a one-size-fits-all deal, and that's why I always recommend HelloFresh, because it's a great way to cook homemade meals with healthy ingredients you love. And it's well researched that cooking at home saves money and saves you from gaining any of that unwanted weight. So go to the link in my show notes to get $80 off, including free shipping on HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. Okay, we're back again. Last time we're with my guest, Troy Carter, and we're talking about nature-based climate change solutions. And then there's a lot to talk about, obviously, in this category. We didn't touch on it, and I wanted to touch on the intersection between climate, spirituality, and business, like in ceremony. How does that all interconnect with each other?
So earlier you were talking about after you had kids, sort of like your system opened to people beyond yourself, right? And so that's sort of the core of spirituality, is that we feel connected to life as part of life. And when we feel connected, like viscerally, tangibly connected in our body, then of course we do things on behalf of the whole. Of course we work at a climate change, solutions company, or our careers become an integrity. And so to have an experience like the one that you had seems to me like an essential part of being human. And there are many different spiritual traditions or plant medicine traditions or community experiences that will encourage that level of worldview and compassion for the whole. And business has to be a part of that, right? So the sort of the economic systems that we are a part of right now don't really reflect the fact that we are all a giant organism called planet Earth, right? They just don't, it doesn't make sense when viewed from that context, where there are people with a lot of money and people with way not enough, where there's a massive level of inequality, disenfranchisement, where there are meant to be some winners and some losers, like viewed in the context that we are together on spaceship Earth, those don't make sense. So part of it is a change in consciousness where we acknowledge that we are very intimately connected with all other humans and all other parts of nature, and where the systems that we're designing reflect that. So whether that's the ownership of businesses, whether that's how we prioritize ecological restoration, whether we choose to cause harm or not with the way we extract resources. So in my journey, they're very much the same thing. I had to spend almost a decade offline, really not working much at all, and diving deep into a spiritual, relational nature journey in order to come into balance. And now, sort of the last couple of years of re-entering entrepreneurship, I can come at it with a much more balanced, mature way that is grounded at that level of revelation that is very basic. We're all in it together. But the temptation for trying to capture all the value myself or trying to compete with other organizations doing the same thing. Like that's sort of the default that we come into the world with right now, or that I came into the world with. And so we just need to get over ourselves a little bit, collaborate with everyone else, realize that we're working on the same problems together, and go through this crisis in a really graceful way rather than a way that causes harm to hundreds of millions of human beings and causes massive ecosystem collapse. So I'm very optimistic that that change in consciousness is right around the corner for many, many people, and that it can be caused by doing something that we love, by being involved with a company that we love, by being on a spiritual path, or just being like a really good human being in a family system, doing, with an open, loving heart for other people. It doesn't really matter at what level or what entry point you're in. I also have a lot of trust that, in a way, like the earth has this covered, that participating in being too stressed about things doesn't help, that being rushed towards the solution also doesn't help, that actually stress and rush are products of the way that we have done things, and actually ease and joy and fun in solving these really large issues is actually a very deep way of addressing things with joy. I mean, think of the Dalai Lama. He's like, hey, all my people got kicked out of Tibet and mass genocide, and guess what? My responsibility on earth is to be happy.
Wow.
So the way we do business can also reflect that.
I love that. I love that you came. So you actually went off the grid for 10 years. Was that after working at Airbnb or so? And you,
Basically, I moved from San Francisco to Hawaii and spent the last 7 years mostly running retreats with my partner on a very remote piece of land up in the
yeah,
island.
and just kind of rejuvenating yourself, rediscovering who you are
Yeah,
based on everything that was wonderful that surrounded you. So that way you could bring this message that you just so eloquently described to people that you may not have that same attitude had you not taken that time to do that.
for sure, for
That's
sure.
very commendable. Very commendable. So you touched on this because I thought that was very eloquent. But what? So for the future of your business and your organizations, what can people do to help? How can they get involved with you or anything
Yeah,
everything you've got going on?
yeah. So we're creating a lot of opportunities for everyone to be a part of Earthshot. Some of those are coming in the future, some of those are coming right now. The easiest way is to go to the website and just sign up for the newsletter, and you'll see what we're all about. If you're a scientist, a data scientist, a software engineer, join the Slack community. We have an amazing group of collaborators where you'll have a really solid community for learning how to get involved with climate change. And we have a bunch of specific projects around ecological modeling and around product development for land OS and biome and a whole bunch of other stuff that you can contribute your talent to. The third is for accredited investors, so like fairly high net worth individuals. We're raising $5 million right now as a seed round. And you can just go to the website, go to earthshot.eco/invest, and all the information you need to see, all the diligence information. And so we're raising money in a really novel way. So it takes about 10 minutes through the payment gateway on the website. And part of that is we're raising money from the coolest shareholders on earth. This is a group of people that are our friends, people who share a deep commitment to ecological action at scale with a lot of technical rigor and some of the most accomplished people that we know. And so if you want to be part of that group, just go to the website, or you can send me an email, troy@earthshot.eco. And I would say the third or the last way of being involved is, so once sign up on the newsletter, and then in the coming months you'll get an opportunity to participate in biome and land OS. So if you're a landowner or someone that owns a large amount of land, help them use our system to use it in regenerative ways and get paid for it, so everyone benefits. And if you just want to walk around the city or your forest with your smartphone and take pictures, we'll be releasing that pretty shortly as well. So there will be concrete ways for everyone on Earth to engage with the climate crisis in a really meaningful way, whether that's with your time, with your money, or with your phone giving us insights. Yeah,
That's
thank you.
amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah, and you said Biome, the app is, do you have a launch date for that for
We don't
people?
have a launch date, but if you sign up on the newsletter, we'll let you know in the
You
coming
let you
month.
know. Okay. Well, normally I have my guests, because our time is up, but normally I have my guests leave me with final words. You kind of just did that. But if there's anything you want to leave with, a final thought, words of, I always say words of wisdom, but you've been giving us that all the way through from the top of the show. But any final words that you would like to say?
I don't know. You know, yeah, I don't know if I have any words of wisdom. Um,
Well, I think everything
in
you said
general,
has a
yeah,
lot of wisdom in it.
maybe one word of wisdom is really like validation. So in general, when I see people, I actually see people doing it pretty well. Like chances are you're doing life really well, whether it feels like it or not.
Mm.
Um, and you don't need to be doing more than what you're doing or doing more than what you feel called to do. If you can tap into what you really want, right? I really want to be in right relationship with my family, or really want to experience nature in a more intimate way, or maintain quality of relationships, or have large systemic change. If you just tap into what you really want, all the gates will open if you feel really passionate and committed to it. So,
Well, that's a good
you got
one for
everything you
not
need.
having one. That's a good one. And yeah, I mean, I love your optimism. I love your optimism, knowing what you know and doing what you're doing, knowing what you know, and still being optimistic. And like you said, anger and rushing things and fear are not going to create the solutions. But what you're doing is bringing about change smartly, really intelligently over a period of time. And I'm so impressed. And I want to thank you so much for your wisdom and your time and for everything that you're doing. And for my audience, I want to say, please reach out. This is a beautiful website, by the way, and it's broken down on what they're all about, how you can invest, what the future looks like. You even have something on there, I think, that says goals for 2030. So see what they're all about and do get involved, because there's, without this beautiful earth that's surrounding us, there's no us. So and if you've got a family, if you've got kids or grandchildren, or you know that that's what the future holds, you want to think about that instead of, keeping it here. So thank you so much for joining me today. Troy, thank you. I want to thank my audience. I'm here the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, so do come and listen. I always have people talking about wonderful things that have to do with longevity, with quality, health, and happiness, and ultimately finding your joy. So keep going out, having those conversations that connect to a healthier you, and I'm going to see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody. Thank you again. Bye.